I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make rhubarb pineapple jam. I'm really excited for this jam. I love pineapple and I think it will go great with rhubarb. And there is 3 ingredients: rhubarb, pineapple, and sugar. In this case, I'll be using honey. And this is about 4¼ cups of honey. And I know it seems like a lot of honey, but this would be 10 cups of sugar. I've got 24 jelly jars in here that are 8-ounce jelly jars. And then I've got my 12-quart stock pot. It's a much larger pot than I think I need, but I want to make sure if it bubbles up, I've got room for that. I have a really large spoon for stirring. And then way back in the back, I do have the lids for my jars and then my rings. And I'm not quite set up yet for all of my canning because we've got time. So the first thing I need to do is get my rhubarb cut up and my pineapple. I need 22 cups of rhubarb. I already have 9 cups in my stock pot, and then 8 cups of pineapple, which should be about 2 pineapples. I do have more rhubarb outside on my plant just in case I need more, and I also have an extra pineapple just in case. And the recipe I'm using today comes from this book. I don't remember if it's 1979, it might be 1977. I love this book. This was my mom's, and I feel like this is the one I use the most. It has such simple recipes, simple ingredients, and they all work really well. Let me get this out of the way. I know a lot of people don't like rhubarb, but I really think you should give it a second chance. It's delicious. It goes savory or sweet. You could make just about anything with rhubarb. It's delicious in pies. It's delicious in jams, although I've not ever made this jam before, so I'm really excited to taste it. But rhubarb really is great, and it's so easy to grow. You almost don't even have to do anything to it. You just plant it in the ground and there you go. So we'll just get these cut up into smallish pieces, and then we need to measure, I need 13 more cups of rhubarb. Now I realize that this recipe is not exactly practical if you don't have your own rhubarb bush, or if you don't know anybody, or your farmer's market maybe doesn't have any. I have seen rhubarb in the grocery store, but not this amount that you would need for this recipe. But if you have your own rhubarb plant or a neighbor or a friend and they don't want any of it, maybe they'll give it to you and you can make this recipe. I need 8 cups of pineapple. I'm going to get my other pineapple cut up just to top this off. I want to make sure I have enough pineapple. And then I should mention, my first 9 cups of rhubarb, that was frozen rhubarb that I had from my fall harvest. So rhubarb, you can harvest usually in the spring. You don't harvest all of it. Do your own research on gardening, but then you continually get new rhubarb. So then I usually do kind of a smaller harvest in the fall. And so I cut that up and froze that, and that's the first 9 cups that are in my pot. So I'm going to hurry and cut up that other pineapple that I got, top this off, and then the rest of it I can eat. My rhubarb and my pineapple are in my stock pot. I'm going to turn this on to high and then add in my honey. So the recipe, I'm not following 100%. The only thing that I'm doing slightly different is it says that you add in half of the sugar and cook it for 15 minutes and then add in the other half of the sugar, which would be 10 cups of sugar. Because I'm not using that many cups of honey, I'm just adding it all in at once. And I think part of that is to let the sugar dissolve a little bit, which the honey will dissolve pretty quickly. So that's the only change that I'm making from the recipe. But I will put those instructions in the description box if you're going to use sugar. Now that my honey is in here, I'm going to really give it a good stir. The rhubarb on the bottom of my pot is still slightly icy from being in the freezer. And whenever you freeze fruit or vegetables, in this case rhubarb, which is a vegetable, it always ends up with extra liquid. And that's just fine. If you're using all frozen fruit, it might take longer to cook down to the right consistency because it does have extra liquid. And I'm really excited for this jam. I think it's going to be a beautiful color. I'm curious to see how red the color will be. I don't really know. You guys will get to see this the same time I do because I've never made this recipe before. And I'm really happy I decided to go with my 12-quart stock pot. I think this would be full all the way to the top of my 8-quart stock pot. So good choice. Now we just wait for that to come up to a boil, and then once it does that, I'll turn it down to a simmer. I'm going to turn on my large canning pot here with my jars and water. I've got it, about up to here with water. And then I've got 24 jars in there. And instead of using my canning rack today, I am using lids on the bottom. That way I can fit a lot more jars in my canning pot at one time than if I were to use the rack. So they are going to be off of the bottom of the pot. And then for my other things here, we are not ready for them yet, but I always get them ready just to make sure I have everything ready. So I've got my jar lifter, lid lifter. Again, here's all of my rings. I've got 2 hot pads here. This one will go for the big pot of jam, and then this one will go for my small saucepan with my lids, which are in water, but that burner's not on yet. And then there is my ladle. So now we just wait. I don't know how long this will take. You can see that it already has quite a bit of liquid in there. Some of this rhubarb looks like green beans. Now that this is up to a simmer or a boil, I'm going to turn it down to, like medium low. I want to keep it at a simmer, but not a rapid boil. Now you don't have to stir this constantly, especially at this point. The recipe even says just stir often, but you don't want to walk away for a long period of time. You want to keep an eye on it. And then of course, the thicker it gets, we'll stir it a little more frequently. But my rhubarb is already cooking down. It's probably the frozen rhubarb that is turning to mush first. So that's good. Some of my pineapple chunks are a little bit too big. I should have cut them finer, but once they start softening, you can just mash them against the side of the pan. You can see how much thicker my jam is now. It's reducing down. And how to tell when your jam is ready is I've got a little dish here that I've had in the fridge. Try not to get a piece with a big chunk of pineapple. And then we'll put it on here and see how long it kind of takes to get thick. That's actually a really nice consistency. I'm going to turn my lids on to about medium. My lids are nice and warm. So bring over our jam. And then I've got my dish rag to wipe the rims of the jars, and I've got my funnel. If I had cut my pineapple into smaller pieces, then I would have kind of a thicker jam instead of a really chunky jam. But I don't mind at all. Now I've got quite a few jars out, just because I had them all stacked in there. I need to take most of them out so I can start adding in the ones with jam. And I may or may not have to do 2 batches of a water bath. We'll see. So 1/4 inch from the rim. And when I'm scooping from my big pot here, I'm trying to scoop from the bottom so I get a little bit of everything, chunks and liquid. Now very carefully, I always like to use a hot pad here. And I'll just show you a couple and then I'll finish the rest off camera. You always want to wipe the rims. If you have anything on the rim, you won't get a good seal. And then get a lid. And a ring. Finger tight. And then into the water. Now, if you get a jar that's a little bit too full, I always have a spoon. You can just share with the next jar. So I've got my canning pot full of jars. I don't have enough room. I thought I might double decker them. I do when I have little half jelly jars, but I want these to be fully submerged in water. So I'm not going to double decker my canning pot. I've turned the heat up to high. I'm going to put the lid on. And it really shouldn't take very long to come up to a boil at all. Once it comes up to a rolling boil, I'll set my timer for 14 minutes. That is for my altitude. Make sure that you double check the processing water bath time for your altitude. Okay, so I ended up with 20 jelly jars and just a little bit left here that I can taste. It's a much darker color than I expected it to be. And it's more browny orange color. Oh, some of my jars are already popping. Some of these ones have already popped too. And all you missed was after these ones had processed for 14 minutes, I put them out here, put my remaining 5 jars in the canning pot and processed again for 14 minutes. So now these will cool off for about 24 hours. I'll let them just sit here and just cool off, and then tomorrow morning, I don't know about where you live, but our water here is a pretty hard water. And so it leaves a white film on everything. So tomorrow morning, I'll go through and make sure all of my jars are sealed, wipe them off. If any of them don't seal, you can just stick it in the fridge. And then I will label and date my jars. So I do have this little bit here that I can taste. And I think it actually looks a much darker brownish color in the jars. Here in this little dish, it's kind of an orangey pink color. And it really is a nice texture. That rhubarb really cooks down into a nice texture. Although I will say, in some of my jars, I do have some kind of big chunks of pineapple. And that's okay. If and when I make this recipe again, I'll definitely cut my pineapple into smaller pieces. And this little dish here is completely cooled off. So this is a really good indication of what the rest of my jam will be like. It's a really nice texture. So let's give it a bite. I wish I had a biscuit or something to put this on. That is really delicious. And it has a really nice texture. Rhubarb is really tart. They keep popping. Rhubarb is really sour and really tart. And that comes through. You get a really tart flavor coming through, but it's sweet at the same time. A little bit of the honey flavor, and then the pineapple. If you were to eat this without knowing that the pineapple was in there, I don't know that you'd be able to tell that the pineapple's in there. I don't know. Maybe it's because I know that it's in there. So I would definitely make this again. If you like pineapple and you like rhubarb, this is the jam for you. And you know, something like this, you can really make a small batch. Just do a couple of cups of rhubarb and maybe 1 cup of pineapple, something like that. Do the math to figure out the quantities for a really small batch. And then you can see what it tastes like. So here we go with my first jam recipe of the year. It sure is delicious, and this will last me more than all year long. I'll even have some jars to give away as gifts. Let me know what you think if you make this recipe. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.